Yeah, I knew you were doing that. I was just gonna hang out and chill. I can't hear you, by the way. There we go.
Oh, that's
Nope.
good.
Can't.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, unfortunately.
You know what I just did? You know what I
Oh, it's so loud.
you know what I just did? I just put you out there
Yeah, I know.
live.
I
Just
was just acting like I didn't know. I knew what you were doing.
oh, that's good. Of course you did. Of course you did. Welcome to the Sons of Thunder, the show where we are setting up a perimeter around the autonomous zone of truth. My name is Joel Sedicase.
My name is Parker Sedicase, and direct hate mail to Joel, for sure.
Believe
He
me,
will address that. He will read it over thoroughly.
and I will then deal with it online. And I will dedicate my life to addressing that.
Excellent.
So, Parker, how you doing today, man? What's new? What's going on? How's life up in the icy tundra of Deerfield?
Life's good. Yesterday, Julie and I went for a walk, and we saw 3 turtles laying eggs. It was pretty awesome. Yeah, I hadn't seen
What?
that before.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
They were getting going.
That's like the perfect thing for you to discover.
Literally like 100 feet from where I live. It was awesome.
I can't believe that, man. That's like such. God knew exactly what you need. I never am gonna come across turtles laying eggs. That's just not gonna. It's
Yeah.
not part of my world.
No,
But for you, it's
I got a very turtley world.
you do. I don't know what the equivalent of that would be for me. Probably like
Twitter beef.
yeah, that's right. If someone
You step out your door and just walk into a Twitter fight.
if someone had printed off an argument on Twitter and like left it on the ground, and I would have just I'd say, oh, this is really, look, nature is really
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's just not part of my world. Yeah,
because I get in Twitter beefs. Just to spell that out. So, dude, sounds like some exciting things going on with you, and I don't know if you can talk about it, but your wrestlers, man, sounds like
dude,
these guys are like
they're so
the,
awesome.
the questions that they're asking in your meetups or your Zoom calls.
Yeah,
What in the world?
dude, they're so great. And we got a broad range of denominations. So sometimes there's some fancy footwork I got to do between, discussions on the Eucharist and mortal and venial sin kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But also they're really sharp guys. And so like last night, randomly right before we left, before we were signing off, like, any other questions? It was an ask anything kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys goes, hey, what about like the Fermi Paradox? I took a whole class on the Fermi Paradox last semester, read this whole book on it. Can we talk about that?
Wow.
You're familiar with that, right?
I don't know what that is. No.
Oh, I don't know a ton about it, but it's basically, it comes from Fermilab.
Is it the observed particles behave
No,
differently?
it's about aliens.
Oh,
Yeah. So is it Enrico Fermi? Is that his name?
that sounds right.
He started
It's either that
Fermilab.
or John.
John.
Fermi.
Yeah, one of the two.
Yeah.
So those are really, really comparable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know the bison there. You did an internship at Fermilab, didn't you?
I didn't do an internship, but I attended a series called Saturday Morning Physics back when I was in high school physics. I did it for like an extra credit thing, but it just rocked my world, man. They were talking about multiple dimensions and
Yeah.
they
Were they talking about
was-
dark matter back then? Was dark matter a live option?
dark matter, I think. Well, there was the dark ages back then for me because I'm so old. I'm an older millennial.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
but I don't remember them talking about dark matter, but probably.
Yeah. So, anyways, they got bison there. Buffalo or bison. I think it's bison is the proper nomenclature there.
Yeah,
But
the preferred nomenclature.
we all, please. We all talked about that growing up. And I have a friend and a supporter who works at Fermilab right now. He's a great guy. He checks the water to make sure there's no like pollution and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Nothing seeping out into the community.
Yeah.
But I asked him, I was like, hey man, what's up with the bison? Like, are you guys trying to repopulate them? He's like, no, it's like they used to have bison burgers and stuff. I was like, I thought you were trying to repopulate them. He It's because Fermi said we are the new frontier of physics. We're the new
Really?
frontier. So the bison are mascots.
No way.
Yeah, isn't that insane?
So Fermilab, for those who don't know, and if you're watching this on, if you're well, okay. First of all, Fermilab is a particle accelerator laboratory that is in
Second largest in
Batavia,
the world.
right next to CERN, I think. Right?
I don't know. They don't use the particle accelerator anymore.
Oh, they don't.
No, because they have a big one in CERN or wherever. So they all just pull their resources.
Oh, I didn't know that because when I was there, they
They
gave us
were,
a tour of the particle accelerator.
you could walk inside where they ran it up.
They were shooting particles. You had
Yeah.
to dodge them. It's
Yeah,
like,
I
oh,
remember.
there goes an electron. Oh, there's a quark.
Yeah,
It was
and that guy
dangerous.
Timmy, he was able to climb walls after that and shoot stuff out of his forearms.
Yeah. Yeah. We never saw that kid again. But then this mysterious hero started showing up on the news.
Yeah,
People called him Particle Boy. It was the weirdest thing.
yeah. So all that to say, what were we talking about? How did we get on
What
Fermi?
you were talking about
Fermi
Fermi
Paradox.
Lab and Fermi
Fermi
Paradox.
Paradox. The Fermi Paradox, from what I remember, was brought up over lunch at the lunchroom in Fermi Labs, I think in the 70s, and it was something like, "Hey, if there's all these worlds that could have aliens, right? There's all this
Right.
stuff going on. Why haven't they contacted us yet?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're familiar with that, right?
I've heard that question. I probably heard of the Fermi Paradox. I'm just not familiar necessarily with that terminology. But yeah, right. If there are, you would think that in a universe our size, as old as it is, if there was an intelligent civilization, I mean, you would think that they would have contacted us.
So they have all sorts of theories on why they don't have that. So that's what we were talking about just at the end.
That's very interesting. And so, just for context, anybody who doesn't know, you work for Athletes in Action, which is a ministry of Crew, which you evangelize and disciple. You win, build, and send athletes. Maybe is a better way to put it.
Yeah, that's good.
And you have another connection to Fermi in that Fermi has Buffalo roaming around the grounds of the particle accelerator laboratory, and you see a buffalo every time you look in the mirror because you
Water buffalo.
resemble a buffalo.
It's
You
really
are-
really good. I don't know. Hey, so you're saying my mic's not on?
Burly. What?
I don't know why my mic's not working. You're saying it's not working?
It might be working fine. I don't, but it just didn't sound. It didn't sound so good.
Does it sound better now?
It about the same. Maybe it is working, and maybe I'm just not hearing it right. Maybe it's
That's
not.
just my voice. That's just my terrible Muppet voice.
Well, your words.
Yeah.
So we're not talking today about the Fermi Paradox or your buffalo-like attributes. We're talking more so. We're actually talking about children. We're talking about Jordan Peterson's fifth rule, and so this is going to be one of those episodes where it's going to get really practical, I hope. And I know both of us, Park, have a desire to make this eminently biblical and gospel centered. And so if you're just joining us in this series, if you're listening to the podcast later on, then just to give you an introduction to what we're talking about, we are going through Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. And we do this every Thursday. We've done it for 4 episodes now. And this is the 5th episode. And we are scrutinizing and analyzing Jordan Peterson's book because we want to see what's good. We want to eat the meat, so to speak, and we want to spit out the bones. And this isn't just a physical discussion, a philosophical discussion, because there's enough meat here where we can actually, there's some nourishment here, but we're all about helping people to think through these things biblically. And Park, I would say there's a lot of people, a lot of our friends, a lot of people who would sort of think like we do, who have been very influenced and very helped by Jordan Peterson. You know, like somebody who would watch one of our Thunder Thursday videos, it's not unlikely that the next video they watch would be like a Jordan Peterson talk.
Yeah.
And, or, you know, Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan or something like that. And so what we want to do is we want to provide a filter and a grid. Scripture tells us to test everything. Do not believe every spirit, but test everything to see if it's true. So we want to help believers to be good Bereans, to search the scriptures and see if what Jordan Peterson says is true. And oftentimes what happens in these episodes is we find a lot of good, and then we find some blind spots. We find some areas that need adjustment or repackaging. And then quite honestly, oftentimes we find ideas that are just wrong, just inaccurate. And we want to think through these things ultimately because we love God and we want to love our neighbor and we want to help our neighbor do the same thing. So the rubber's really going to hit the road here when we're talking about parenting because, you know, it's one of the most important topics we can talk about. And so this isn't just some abstract idea for self-improvement. The way we handle this is going to impact the way the next generation is raised. So there's a lot riding on this conversation. I hope you're ready for it. You're totally muted now. So I'll just speak for you.
Nope.
No.
Here I am.
Okay.
Does it sound any better or no?
No, it sounds exactly the same. I'm sure it's fine.
Really stressing me out here.
Your mic's on. Your mic must be on.
Okay.
All right. We just lost half our viewership.
Good.
And half our friends.
Good. Well,
so let's get into it. You know, maybe the best thing we can do right now is to introduce people if they haven't ever interacted with Jordan Peterson or his Fifth Rule, if they've never read this book. Let's play this clip and then interact with it. Maybe we can pause it as we go and then we'll talk about it.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to add this to the stream. Trigger warning for those who don't like profanity. There's 2 naughty words in this. So speaking of parenting, if your kids are watching, you're going to want to fast forward or have a constructive conversation with them about using our words to honor God. Here we go.
Together and on her deathbed too. Like,
whoop.
Wow.
Yeah, I was listening at 2 times speed earlier. Okay. Here we go.
Number 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. This has sort of been a through line to at least the beginning part of our
yeah, well, the first thing is it's the monster thing, like the Beauty and Beast thing. You are not a good guy, and you will take revenge on your children if they misbehave. You think, oh no, I like my children. It's like other people might not like them.
Quick shout out to Total Depravity here.
Yeah.
You are not a good guy. You will take revenge on your children.
He's speaking directly to Dave.
That's right. You individually.
Oh, is that part of your rule? No, Dave, you are bad.
I wrote this chapter with you in mind. It's not for anyone else.
Maybe they don't behave very well, you know, and you think you like them because you're a saint, but you're not. And you will take revenge on those children if they do things that make you dislike them. So you're in the grocery store and you've got a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old's pretty smart, checking you out all the time, like poking you and prodding you and seeing what's there, because that's what little kids do. They're not that verbal, so they're like they have. You could compare their behavior in some ways to pack animals like dogs, which is why they like dogs and get along with dogs. They understand each other, you know, and so they're testing you out. So they have a temper tantrum in the store and you don't know what to do about it. What you do, your kid has a temper tantrum in the store, you pick up the child, you go outside with them, you stand them up somewhere and just let them have it. Let them have the temper tantrum. It's like, they'll get sick of it soon enough. Go somewhere boring and dull. Say, well, have at her, man. Then the kid's done, you say, we're going to stand right here till you decide that you're going to behave. The child knows what that means. It's like, you're going to behave, or we're just going to stand here. It's like, fine. Okay, you don't do that. The child has a temper tantrum. It's the third one, you know, you're embarrassed, you're turning red, everyone's sweating, everyone's looking at you like you're a horrible parent. It's like really unpleasant. think, oh, I love my child. I like my child. It's like, no, you don't. That's a lie. You go home, the kid's forgotten all about it, you know. They go in their room, they make a little drawing, they're all thrilled, they come out and show it to you. And maybe they did a really good job, you know. Maybe they're even a little guilty about having the damn tantrum. But you, man, you're not happy. And you think, yeah, that's nice. And you go back to whatever useless thing you're doing. And you think, I got that little bastard. And you think, no, I wouldn't think that. It's like, yeah, wrong.
You would.
Wrong. Not only would you think it, you would act it out. And if you don't think that that's true, then you don't know yourself very well. And
can we just appreciate the fact here?
Can you? I didn't hear what he said. What was that last word that he?
Oh,
little something.
I'll tell you when you're older.
Yeah.
Peterson pulls no punches here, and in the chapter either. We're going to talk about why we titled this, or why the graphic said Jean-Jacques Rousseau. What did I say?
Destroyed with facts and logic.
Yeah. We're going to talk about these two conflicting. There it is. Worldviews and views about children and parents, and one that says people are innocent, and one that says basically what Peterson is saying is like,
yeah,
you're not good, and neither are your kids.
Dude,
you have to deal with that.
I love that so much, and that's something I really appreciate about him. Like you said, he doesn't pull punches, but it's not just like inflammatory, trying to be a jerk. He's like, hey, this is true. You will resent your kid, and even if you're not willing to admit it, it'll come out in certain ways. It's going to come out, and yeah, we can talk about that more as we go on, but it's just so true. It's just like, you don't want to admit it because you want to be nice, but you've resented a kid before who's screaming in your face. Like, go away, little kid, you know?
And that's a normal thing. That's a natural reaction. Own it, and then deal with it and take measures to prevent it from happening in the future.
Right. And that's why the rule can sound really harsh. Like, don't let your kids do anything. And you instantly think like, all right, well, so does that mean like I didn't like kids that did karate growing up? So what, I don't let my kids do karate because I don't enjoy that or something? You know, it's like not really. It's not really.
My kids are in karate.
Yeah.
How dare you?
I know, it's really hard for me to love them.
Well, it's hard. It's not hard for them to love you because you're dear old Uncle Parker, and they really
until
love
they
you,
see
man.
this podcast.
They really love you, and I'm gonna have them listen to this now.
You should have them do jujitsu.
What I'm gonna say is, oh, you guys love Uncle Parker, huh? You won't after this. Listen to this, kids.
I'll throw a temper tantrum and get all sorts of attention from them.
That's been your MO since you were a little guy.
That's right.
All right, let's keep going.
Oh, there's a good part in here about being the mother's favorite. And I was like, yeah, man, that's why I'm so awesome at stuff, because I was mom's favorite little boy.
That was in the last chapter.
That's this one.
Oh, that is in this one. You're right. I read it last week. Okay. All right, here we go.
Go ahead and play.
We're going to talk. You're not mom and dad's favorite, by the way.
Just go ahead and play.
That's me.
So you got to think, that little kid is little and powerless. Well, not as powerless as you might think, but fundamentally, you got the upper hand. And you've got the proclivity for tyranny deeply rooted in you. And so you better be real careful around that child. I used to tell my kids, you know, when I was not in a good mood, to say, like, it would be better if you were in your room. And they didn't mind. They knew what it meant, you know. They were very young. They could understand that. It's like, you're a fine kid, you know, pat, pat, pat. I'm not in a good mood. Things are likely to be unpleasant. Why don't you just go play in your room for a while? It's like, away they went. They knew how to play in their room.
Pat, pat, pat.
You know, because I didn't want them being around me when I wasn't going to be a good guy.
Yeah.
And so, and kids, they know they can handle that, man. They can't handle lies. They can handle that sort of truth, no problem. And so, like, both my wife and I were very careful. It's like, when we're starting to not be happy with the kids, with one kid or the other, it was time to have a chat and figure out what it was that had gone off the rails and how we were going to fix it, so that we were like thrilled to have that kid around. And that's the thing about kids, is you can be thrilled to have them around. Not always. You're tired, you're hungover, like you've had a bad day, the kid's cranky. Like, I'm not saying this is utopia. It's not. That's not the point. But the point is, though, you can manage your relationship with your kids, and you can have an honest relationship with them, and then it will be the best relationship with anybody you've ever had in your life. And I can say that with some certainty, because, like, I had a rough time with my daughter because she was very, very, very ill for a long time. It was...
Quick pause right here. He's speaking from some lived experience here, because his daughter Michaela runs his she's like the public face of his, at least in terms of his social media production and podcast and things like that. So he knows what it's like to have a great relationship with his kids.
Yeah, I think this has been my favorite chapter so far, and I think a lot of that's because of these personal. He's got great stories and truly heart-wrenching stories. And I know that word's tossed around so often, but it's actually heart-wrenching. Where you're like, you can see this little kid he's describing, and you feel the dread. Yeah, so we can get into that.
Yeah, no, mine too. I wrote in here at one point. I said, Peterson at his best, and at another point I said, your favorite chapter so far. Yeah. All right, here we go.
It's really bad for like 7 years. It's still touch and go, but she was in excruciating agony for 2 straight years, which I can't believe she even did it, because like 3 hours of pain that's intense, that's rough. 2 years, it's like maybe you don't get through that, you know? But we had a good relationship and thank God, if our family hadn't been well put together by that point, it would have taken tragedy and turned it into hell. And so we had a rough time for those years, and still it was good. You know, and that's saying something, because, well, she lost her hip and her ankle during that period. They were both replaced when she was 16, and so she was walking around on 2 broken legs for 2 years. It was brutal. But like my son, for example, during that period of time, and like hats off to him. He was only 14. You know, when he wanted to be out with all his friends, he stuck around. He supported her. He never complained about it. He never complained about the fact that he didn't get the attention he should have got. He was there like a bloody rock. And his sister relied on him a lot, loves him to death, partly because of that. It's like, that was a good thing, and it was because of that foundation that we had laid, you know, and we wouldn't have got through that without that.
It's powerful. I mean, I could even see it in your face, like the just a slight change as you talk about it, because it's real.
It was brutal, man. Like one night I went down to talk to her, and like the pain had driven her past the edges of her sanity. I could see that she was going to crack, and we were looking all over the world to find somewhere to get her ankle replaced fast, you know, because it degenerated very quickly, and the surgeon that we had been talking to wanted to fuse it. And
all right, let's pause right there. I think that's probably given us enough to talk about here.
Yeah.
What do you think are what's his main point? What's the point of this chapter, Park, as you read it?
Well, so I think the main point of this chapter is that kids aren't naturally good. You don't need to just leave them alone and let them play and they'll figure stuff out. But that kids take a lot of work and discipline, and you don't have to infantilize them for all that long. You know, you can treat them
at all.
Like
you never have to infantilize them.
Right. And so what he's saying is, don't make little tyrants because you think that your little Billy is a good little boy. Well, he's not a good little boy, and you have to actually do some hard work and take responsibility to correct and teach in order to not raise a tyrant.
Dude, do you know what you're describing right now? Now, again, let's filter what is being said here by Dr. Peterson through the biblical worldview, which teaches certain things about human nature. So what he's saying is in the chapter, he directly refutes the idea put forward as one of these ideas coming out of the Enlightenment, popularized by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, that children are sort of this paradisal, primeval goodness. They have this inherent goodness within them that is only corrupted by society. Well, Peterson hits that head on, and Peterson's teaching is much more in line with the Christian doctrine of total depravity and at least of original sin, which original sin is more big tent Christianity than the specific Calvinist doctrine of total depravity. But even though I think that, you know, there's a lot of overlap there, and you might even say one entails the other. But there was, I don't know if you saw this, but there's
you about to talk Tucker Carlson?
Yeah, the Tucker Carlson.
So good. I'm so glad. Perfect timing.
All right, talk about that. Because Tucker Carlson, his Chiron on
Yeah.
his show recently said, what
Yeah.
did it say?
So
Go ahead.
he's got this face, and he's like, and then the Chiron is, no child is born evil, and sin cannot be inherited. And I think what he's trying to get at is against, white guilt and inherited guilt from forefathers and stuff like that. But what he ends up doing is totally denying the Christian faith that he says he espouses. Where yes, you are born evil, and sin absolutely is inherited. Not there's debate on the culpability and guilt associated with the sin of Adam, and there's all sorts of debates within Christian theology and philosophy about that. But every Christian will affirm that, yeah, you're born with original sin.
Did you see what I did here? Look at our Chiron.
Oh, yeah.
Children are born evil, and sin can be inherited. I understand what Tucker Carlson is doing there. What he needs to do, though. Well, I honestly don't know where his theology is.
He's a Episcopalian.
Okay, so that could, honestly, in today's world, that could mean a lot of different things. And I don't know enough about him, and I haven't heard him. My only interaction with Tucker Carlson is in those viral videos where
destroying
he destroys someone.
And facts. Rousseau, where he agrees with Rousseau without facts or logic.
Yeah, right. Without evidence, Tucker Carlson claims.
Yeah.
But what he's trying to do is he's trying to say you don't have shared guilt with other people based on sort of a common genetic heritage or appearance. Right. But he overstates the case, because the fact of the matter is all of us do have inherited sin natures, not because of our skin or our family group, but by virtue of being born into the human race, by virtue of being a descendant of our father Adam. Yeah. Our first father Adam. Adam, the biblical or the theological phrase is that Adam is our federal head. In other words, he's our representative. He represented us historically before God, and in some sense, and like you said, there's debate about this, but in some sense, we were in Adam. So everyone dies today because everyone sinned in Adam. So
that's even putting it. You're cutting off the debate there by saying that being in Adam.
No. I'm saying that I was trying to quote Romans 5:12.
Okay.
Maybe I misquoted it.
I don't know, but anyways, yeah, like, because some people would say, yeah, you're actually in Adam, like metaphysically somehow. And then there's others who are like, no, you inherited your sinful nature from the father, and all the way down. That's kind of what I hold to.
Well, here's what I was getting at, and so rather than just try to summarize it, so Romans 5:12 says, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, in this way death spread to all people because all sinned." All sinned, past tense. Not all sin currently. And actually, this is one of my kids. We're going to talk about catechizing our kids later. But I've got 4 kids, for those who don't know. And one of our catechism questions is, if God made everything good, why is there pain in the world? And why do people hurt and die? And the answer is, no, my kids are going to kill me. No, I hope they don't listen to this.
Yeah, man, come on.
I'm getting my 2 answers confused, but it's basically, death came in through Adam's sin. Everyone dies because everyone sinned. And the kids always want to say everyone sins, but I'm trying to actually get a quote in from Romans 5:12. Everyone dies, present tense, ongoing sense.
Have you checked the Greek on that?
I can.
I don't know. I'm not familiar. I haven't looked at that in the Greek to see if that is present or if that's a translational thing.
I'll check on it.
Yeah.
But now, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if that's what the text is talking about. Like, everyone sinned in Adam. I think there's more ambiguity than that, because no one will die for the sins of their father, but for their own sins, right? Like, we talked about this last time about.
All right. I just looked it up. So
yeah. What do you got? It's Romans 5:1. What is it?
Romans 5:12. Yeah, no, it's he marton, which is third person aorist active indicative. So aorist is not
Third person aorist.
yeah,
active.
and for those who don't know Greek, aorist is not past tense, but it's the closest that the Greek has to past tense. It indicates a completed punctiliar action, an action that took place. Basically, there's different ways of looking at tense in the Greek, but it's talking about, it's the closest way to translate it would be sinned past tense.
Oh, so what? Hamartias, Hathanatas, Kaihutos, Heis Pantas. Does it say all died too?
It says, and let's see, all.
I don't have my English pulled out now.
Anthropos.
Right. So
I'm
looking at the second part there. Eif, Ho, Pantes. Right there, Hathanatas.
Well, I don't know. Let's keep going. I'm going to look this up because now I'm curious. Yeah. But regardless,
we inherit a sin nature from our forefather and federalhead Adam.
Right. And as I'm looking this up, the biblical teaching is with regard to headship is that we're either under Adam's federal headship, under Adam's representation, or we're under Christ's.
Yeah.
And if we're under Adam's, then we have this undealt with sin nature.
And so much more. And we're in the rebellious camp still, right? Like
correct.
Federal head, Adam,
correct.
Declared war against God, and you're born into that war, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, we're going through Romans with the wrestlers right now. Has been awesome because you see Paul's arguments where he goes through and he says, you're a slave to sin, and then you're transferred into being a slave of righteousness. You are, against him. You're a rebel, right? And then you become part of his team. You are dead in your trespasses and sin, and then you become alive, and you're in this kingdom of rebellion, and then you become. And so it's one or the other, and it's so amazing because it clears up all these issues of, well, what about the good guy who practices this religion?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, dude, read Romans. Like, which kingdom is he in? Which is he spiritually alive or spiritually dead? And Paul doesn't leave any wiggle room. It's so amazing. His argument in Romans, he just keeps building on it and upping the ante each time.
So looking at the Greek, and I actually pulled up an interlinear as well because what was throwing me off, Greek sentence structure is so much different than ours.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to read it as the words are written, like word for word, it's because of this, just as through one man sin into the world entered,
mm-hmm.
and through sin death also. Thus to all men death passed, for that, or because, or since, all sinned. So death. So okay. So maybe I was overstating the case a little bit. I'm trying to analyze this as I'm speaking to you while we're recording this and broadcasting this. But basically, death passed to everyone. So it's not everyone. So when I say everyone dies present tense, what I'm getting at is death spread to everyone. In other words, death is the universal destiny and an outcome of everyone's life currently up to the present time, because everyone sinned. It is in an aorist. It's not everyone is sinning. That's my point.
Yeah, but so are you saying that everyone sinned in Adam? Because that's
Yes.
a specific case. But that's debated. That's like
Sure.
Right, and that's more Roman Catholic than Protestant view.
No.
Yeah.
Everyone sinned in Adam. You're saying that's a more Roman Catholic than Protestant?
Yeah, that's the more Roman Catholic view. There's
why do you say that?
Well, because that's like they were somehow metaphysically in Adam, in his like loins at the time. Everyone was in there. I think that's the more classic Reformed or Roman Catholic view. Then there's like the inherited sin but not inherited guilt view. There's inherited sin and guilt. I think Calvin kind of takes more of the inherited sin and guilt.
Oh,
You're guilty for Adam's sin.
that would be more like my position.
My position is more you inherit a sinful nature and you act on that sinful nature. You can't help but act on that sinful nature. And so when you sin, you are punished for your sins, not Adam's sins, not your father's sins,
Right.
but you have inherited a corrupted. So it's corruption, a sinful, corrupted nature.
Would you say that there is some sort of ancestral connection, some sort of connection of, I don't know if you want to call it metaphysical or ontological, having to do with,
I don't. I think we all come from Adam, and so we can't help but inherit a sinful nature. I think this is speculation, man, but I think it comes through the father, because of federal headship,
I
right?
agree
He's
with
the federal
that.
head of my family,
I agree with that.
and Jesus doesn't have an earthly father,
Correct.
and so he didn't inherit a sinful nature from Joseph.
Well, I
think that's an important point.
I totally get that. And you know what else? I think it's also significant that in Isaiah, I want to say 9, when it talks about how the Messiah will be called Everlasting Father.
Mm-hmm.
That's always perplexed me, because it's like, well, but Jesus isn't the Father. Jesus
Right.
is the Son. Why are you calling him
I
Father?
always think about that too. Right.
But the idea is, if sin is inherited through the Father, let's say this, the minimal case we can make is that in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. And that's a direct quote from 1 Corinthians 15:22, which 1 Corinthians is that brilliant, 1 Corinthians 15 is that brilliant passage where Paul lays out the gospel.
Yeah.
This is the gospel.
I think the broader systematic theological view is that it's not like a momentary, like, okay, and everyone's dead, but since Adam's corrupt and he is the progenitor of all humankind, he cannot pass on anything but a sinful, corrupted nature. How
Correct.
could he? Right? So in that sense, all have died because anyone coming from him will have sin, and what comes from sin, death. So that's more the view I'm taking versus like, yeah, everyone. I don't even understand the other view. Like, you're in Adam. It's like, what does that mean? I didn't exist yet.
Right.
So I don't know, man. This is a debate, right? That
Sure. Yeah.
all sorts of Christians are still wrestling with. But
Right. No, that's right. And I think whichever view you take of it, the idea that we are currently, that all mankind is either in Adam or in Christ, in terms of who's going to be our representative, whose nature do we have passed on to us.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
this is why being born again is such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The first time you were born with a corrupted nature. Right. You inherited sin. The second time you're born, you inherited a new nature made after God, right? With new desires.
Yeah. No, exactly right. And so I actually found a passage that I had in the back of my mind as we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was getting this idea from Romans 5, but now I realize it's not. So I just pulled up CARM, Christian Apologetics Research Ministry, Matt Slick's ministry. And he's got this article on original sin. Are we punished in Adam's sin? But it's not the article that I'm as interested in, but it's the reference he makes to Hebrews chapter 7, verses 7 through 10.
Mm-hmm.
In this passage, it says, without any dispute, the lesser is blessed by the greater. And in this case, mortal men receive tithes, but in that case, one receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives on. And so to speak, through Abraham, even Levi, who received tithes, paid tithes, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now, without getting into all the history and the genealogical records of ancient Israel, what's basically being described in this passage is this. And this is a secondary point made from the primary point of that passage. Abraham paid a tithe to Melchizedek. Going back, you can read about it in Genesis.
Yep.
Okay. The point of the author of Hebrews here is that Abraham's descendant Levi, who received tithes from all of Israel, because it's from Levi that the priestly class came.
The Levitical priesthood, yeah.
The Levitical priesthood. When Adam paid tithes to Melchizedek, in some sense, Levi, the ancestor of the Levites and the descendant of Abraham, was still in the loins of Abraham. In other words, in some way, Levi was there.
Mm.
Sort of.
I think that's, if you're reading a metaphysical point or an ontological point in there, I don't think that's what it's saying. I think are you saying that?
What I'm saying is, whatever the author means, there is some connection there.
Because if he's not greater than Abraham, and if Abraham paid to Melchizedek, then
Melchizedek is greater.
Exactly, because he's not greater than his father was.
And the whole point of that is that Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek.
Yeah.
And therefore, the priesthood of Jesus Christ is greater than the Levitical priesthood. That's the point being made there in Hebrews, as I understand it.
Right.
So
how does that relate to what we're saying?
All I'm getting at here is this. The author of Hebrews draws on the idea that the descendant is somehow in the ancestor when the ancestor is acting. And I think that there's a principle we can draw out there to say, if that's true, in whatever sense it's true, then we, as the descendants of Adam, are in our ancestor Adam as he is disobeying God and sinning. Maybe that's overstated, but it seems like you can draw that principle there.
I think it is,
given the other passages.
We're going off topic here, but if that's the case, and we're responsible for the sin of Adam, like culpable, then I don't see why we would ever have a problem with inherited guilt of racism if our family ever participated, because somehow our
parents did.
If our great grandfather owned slaves, then we were in him while he did that, and so we are also culpable. Like I don't think so. I think that Jeremiah talks against that, right? Like, no longer shall you say the father ate sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge, because everyone will die for their own sin.
Right.
And you all inherit the sin, but you act on it, and that's why you're guilty. I'm not guilty for something I didn't do, but I inherited the sinful nature and I acted on it and I wanted to.
Okay, so maybe a way we could say this then is, it's not like if your great grandpa was a bank robber. I mean, just to use an example that's like not a hot topic right now.
Sure.
If your great grandpa was a bank robber, you're not guilty of his bank robbery or something like that.
No.
But in a sense, you inherited the same sinful nature that was passed down to your grandfather. You're sinful in the sense that there's a direct lineage there of sin.
For sure. I couldn't inherit anything else except
that's all he had to offer.
And that's what I was making the point about Adam.
Yeah.
That's all Adam had to offer. He was corrupt, and he was corrupted through through a sinful moral rebellion against God.
Yeah.
And that's all he could pass down was moral corruption to all of his children.
Yeah. Well then
doomed us all to death.
Yeah. So then the Hebrews passage then is talking about a hierarchy in terms of Abraham is greater than Levi.
Yes.
Levi
he's the progenitor of the whole, Jewish race.
Right. People. So for Abraham to pay deference to Melchizedek shows that the entire Israelite nation is in some sense at that same time paying deference. In other words, I understand the point being made, and probably there's a lot more to hash out here.
Yeah.
But the point being made is all of Israel, it's basically this: hey, do you respect the Levitical priesthood? Then you really ought to respect Christ.
Exactly.
That's really the point.
It's an argument a fortiori, right, from the lesser to the greater.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay.
Now, so sorry, Tucker, but yes, you're born corrupt. You're born with a sinful nature, and it is inherited. Yeah. Even if guilt for specific crimes that your father and grandfather did aren't inherited to you, their corrupt nature for sure is.
And let's put a verse up here. Donna, one of our viewers here who's watching live. So if you're listening to this on the podcast later on, the reference on the screen is Deuteronomy 24:16, which says, parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. So this is why I love doing these live. So Donna, thank you so much for that reference. That's a great reference. And it shows that that even, well, okay. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, maybe we can just let that stand.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So this is another point, going back to Peterson. Peterson has no problem with inherited. Well, he wouldn't say it the same way we do, right? Like he wouldn't want to tie that, probably not to a sinful nature, even though he might use the word. The content's different, but he talks about society and the view that, hey, kids are born good, but it's actually society that teaches them to be bad.
Which is Rousseau's view.
Yeah, right. And so right before he gets in on Rousseau, he just has this great little argument where he says, if society is corrupt but not the individuals within it, then where did the corruption originate? How is it propagated?
Right.
Like society is corrupt, and you talk about society, this abstraction, but society is made up of individuals. So what are you talking about? Where does that come from? Where does it stem from? So if society is corrupt, then it's made of corrupt people, right? Or the laws were made by corrupt people. It doesn't just come out that the whole is corrupt and none of its parts are corrupt at all.
Well, right. It's like if you have a bunch of pure water droplets, and you put them in,
I'm interested to see where you go with this.
So if you've got a bunch of pure water, and you take all those pure water droplets and you put them together in a bucket, the bucket's going to be filled with pure water. Yeah. There's no sense that water can be corrupted unless something else gets in there. Yeah. Say bacteria or some sort of contaminant, something like that. So there has to be something to corrupt the water. In the old days they used to think what is it? Abiotic genesis or whatever it is. Abiogenesis, this idea that life is sort of spontaneously, worms will sort of spontaneously erupt in your bread if you leave it out. Yeah. It's like now we know, no. Something has to get in there, an egg or a spore, something. The mold has to come. Is
that abiogenesis? I thought that, I don't know. Maybe that might be with evolution. But yeah, anyway.
Abiogenesis is the idea that life is spontaneously
life comes from non-life.
Correct.
Yeah, right. Abio, right? Non-life.
Non-biotic
giving life. Yeah, right. So that would work in the bread thing, even though, yeah. But so let's go into Rousseau, because he jumps right into that. This idea of the noble savage, which apparently Rousseau never used that word. I know someone out there might go, actually Rousseau never said that.
He never said what? What did
he never used the word noble savage?
Oh yeah, right.
It doesn't refute the fact that he did talk about that content all the time. Mm-hmm. So even though he didn't use the word noble savage, he talked about that concept. Yeah. And so the idea of the noble savage is that man is good and it's society that corrupts. And so if you look out at this is kind of propagated today, man. You look at like Pocahontas maybe, where it's or actually the updated Pocahontas. What's Pocahontas in space? Avatar.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Elizabeth Warren. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that, like, if we could just get back to nature, you'd see that these savages were so, noble, and it's kind of weird to say savages right now, anyways. But it's really uncouth today to say savages.
Well, but that's just the idea. The very idea of the noble savage is so derogatory, even while it's supposed to be so. It's just like. It's like that poem, "The White Man's Burden" by Rudyard Kipling. If you ever read it, you don't know about this? Oh, geez, it's like nowadays we look at it as you read about it as like, oh, the white man has the duty of civilizing all these unwashed masses, and it's like you read it now and you're like, dude, how could anyone think that way? Yeah. But back then they had such a patronizing view of every other culture. It's like yeah. And that's this idea of the noble savage, I think, played out. It's like they're savages. They're practically children, barely one step above the beast, but they're so noble. It's like, dude, you're not viewing them the way the Bible describes them. These are men and women. Right. These are persons. Yeah. They're made in the image of God like you. Get off your high horse. Yeah, you're not ontologically better than these people.
That's so funny too, yeah, man. Because you see that all the time. where you're accidentally being very offensive.
Right,
And
right.
it's sometimes it's like soft bigotry of low expectations.
That's
There's that
exactly
word
it.
going around
That's
too.
exactly
But
it.
yeah, it's so this idea that of the noble savage, that it's like an abstraction that, apart from the negative societal forces, we would be good. And so Peterson's like, well, if you're grounding that in evolutionary biology, that's not true, because the apes rip each other apart, and they do what we would say is murder, and they do these raids, and they eat each other, and it's gruesome, man. Who's the ape lady that he brings up? I always forget her name.
Jane Goodall.
Goodall. It is Goodall. And she held these results. She held on to them for a while because she was worried that,
meaning she didn't release them to the public. Her observations. Yeah.
Right, because she was worried that maybe it was her fault. Maybe something she did spread like the human sin to the noble apes, which is crazy.
Because she's observing this behavior in the apes that is gruesome, grotesque. Like you said, it'd be considered murder if we're talking about people here.
Yeah.
At one point, one of the apes, who she nicknamed Satan, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that.
That tells you something. But he cups his hand and puts it under the bleeding face wound.
Yeah, you don't got to get into all that, man. It's rough.
It's very rough. But you know what? Here's why I bring that up, and we don't have to get into the other examples because it's really grotesque. The idea that, Peterson's point is this: being more primitive, and he wants to relate this to childhood, sort of undeveloped childhood.
Right.
Being more primitive doesn't mean that you are more moral, holy, kind, virtuous. Those two things do not automatically go together.
No, you have to be civilized.
That's it. That's it.
And that's not this quaint Victorian era, I'm civilized and we'll have some tea. It's like a hard
up.
Right. It's a hard process of being civilized, like to turn from a savage little child who looks at Peterson's daughter on the monkey bars and steps on her hand slowly as he looks in Peterson's eyes. Like, dude, that happens. I've seen little crazy kids, and you're like, there's something wrong with you, man. You're looking me in the eyes. You don't care. He had a great line about that where he's like, he goes, the kid, he's saying what the kid's thinking in his mind. And the kid is standing on top of the monkey bars, and his daughter's holding on, and he's stepping slowly like something out of Lion King when Scar's got his hands on it. And he looks over at Peterson as he does it. And Peterson says it's as if he's saying, up yours, Daddy-O. I thought that was so funny when he throws his stuff in. Hit up yours, Daddy-O. That was his philosophy. So amazing.
Yeah.
And then he goes, Peterson says, he walks over to the kid and says, to his great and sultry shock, I picked him up bodily off the playground structure and threw him 30 feet down the field. No, I didn't. I just took my daughter somewhere else. But it would have been better for him if I did.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, that's right. And so to combine all this, to synthesize everything we've been talking about so far, Peterson's view of childhood is not the starry-eyed view of some of these Enlightenment figures that say man is a tabula rasa, a blank slate, or even further than that, man is inherently noble. Humanity is inherently noble, and it's only through societal influence that man becomes corrupted.
Yeah.
Instead, his view is much more common to the biblical view, which says, however we got this way, if left unchecked, man will treat one another savagely.
Yeah.
And it's through, now this is where he starts getting into parenting. It's through responsible discipline. And as Christians, we would say discipling.
Yeah. And catechizing, a word that we hardly ever use today.
Right. And so it's through that children are adjusted to. Peterson brings it to like, so that you fit in well in society.
Yeah, civilized and socialized.
Right. Civilized, meaning made fit for civilization.
Mm-hmm.
But as Christians, we would say our ultimate goal is not civilization. It's to bring someone up in what the Apostle Paul calls the paideia of God, which is a reference. Doug Wilson does a good job of talking about this, where he talks about the paideia of God being the Christian version of what was known in the Roman times as the paideia of Rome, or the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Good little Roman children, good in print and scare quotes,
right.
were brought up to be fit for the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
To
But
be good citizens.
That's still very much in play in Britain today.
How so?
Right? There's something it's like to be a Brit. Like there's British, what do they call it? You know what I'm talking about? It's like British gentlemen, something like that, where it's like there's something it means where they hold themselves in this high regard. We're British. That's what we are. And they're gentlemen. It's like it's not like gentlemen like they're fops or something. It's like
white gloves and powdered wigs.
No, yeah, right. It's more like chivalrous. It's like we're gentle, but we will throw fisticuffs.
It's a little bit like the no true Scotsman fallacy is what you're making me think of. Somebody who reads the newspaper and says, "Oh, who did that? Who committed that crime? Let me see here. No Scotsman would ever commit a crime like that." And then he reads on and sees that it was a Scotsman, and he goes, well. No true Scotsman would ever commit a crime like that.
Sure.
It's like there's something about being a Scotsman that it's more than just who we are. It's what we act like.
And dude, I don't know a ton about this because we live so far downstream of that. But I would imagine there was something like that with being American, right? Like with being like we're free people. That's I think just from like reading history and thinking about. I don't know. You read history books, and it wasn't that they were all reading Locke and they were all philosophers. Our founding fathers were, but Os Guinness quotes someone from like the Civil War era, and he says like, no, someone from the Civil War era was interviewing someone from the Revolutionary War era, like the last of the survivors, right? Which is crazy to think about that time period. But he goes, we weren't reading Locke or anyone like that. I don't know who those are. We were just born free, and we intended to be free always.
We intended to stay that way. Right.
Right. Yeah. Intended to stay that way. And so that you can get that from nationalism or patriotism. But what you're talking about is getting that in Christianity. Like I'm going to teach you how to be a Christian man in discipleship. Right. Well, what does a Christian man think about this? Well, let's read the word and let's reason through.
Yeah.
And we're little Christs. I'm going to go walk around and represent him in everything I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's something that it's like, be a Christian.
And there, it's what's interesting. Think about two of the words that have been used so frequently in public conversation lately: freedom and justice.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom and justice. So much national conversation has been centered around those two words. With the coronavirus lockdowns and quarantines, we wanted our freedom.
Yeah.
With the killing of George Floyd and attention being drawn to the way minorities have been treated in America. It's like we need justice. That these are two words. Those are two words that have deep roots in the American system because American, not to say that everything American is Christian or anything like that, but the foundational American ideas draw from the well of the Christian worldview.
Right.
And what do we see in the Christian worldview? If the Son has set you free, you'll be free indeed. The idea of justice flowing down like a mighty river, the idea of righteousness, which in the original Greek is the same word as justice. These are Christian concepts.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that our nation is calling out for freedom and calling out for justice right now.
Yeah.
And it's so stupid. Well, I'm not going to say stupid. It's a shame that those two words have been politicized as right and left or something like that.
Oh, yeah, dude.
You know what I mean? It's like, as a Christian, I want both.
Yeah.
I want both.
And a third one is peace, right? Like we're called to be peacemakers, and also, there's the chant, no justice, no peace.
Yeah.
And from a certain perspective, it sounds like, oh, you're going to riot until you get justice.
Yeah.
But from a theological perspective is absolutely true.
That's right.
There's no justice, there's no peace. You have no peace with God without justice, without the cross, right? And it's amazing. I heard a pastor recently talk about that. And so, justice and truth and peace and freedom, all these things that are like, man, you need God for these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I love that you said peace with God, because this is where the Christian worldview enters in and is really why you have to see you can't just start with Christian ideas. You've got to take them all the way. You got to play it all the way through, because if you want to talk about justice and peace, you have to realize what justice means, and justice only makes sense according to an absolute standard of justice, and that absolute standard of justice is God's justice necessarily. And
well, yes. So just real quick to flesh that out, dude, because that's a really important point.
I know you agree with that, but the point being, real justice, if we really got real justice, we would get God's condemnation because of having acted out on our sinful nature. We have to be reconciled and have peace with God first before we can have true and lasting peace with one another.
Yeah. But you and a really important point that you brought up that I think is worth going over a little bit, at least, is you need God to have justice. And Amen. It's like, well, you can just say that, right? Like, could we believe that? But why is that true? Well, it's true because if you don't have an external, ontic referent point, if you don't have something beyond creation as a standard for justice, then it's just your society setting up justice, right? Or it's individual, and that's really obviously not true, because you bump into someone and then you have conflicting senses of justice. Right. But then when if it's societal based, then that society bumps into another society with a different view of justice, and well, who's to adjudicate between these two? These people think these people should be in chains. These people say that's egregious and wrong. Well, no, of course, like, these disagreements point us to a transcendent God, right? Who made us in his image. And that's why, we long for justice and we love it, but justice is coming at us too, because we've acted unjust. And
this is why what you just said, I think, is what Peterson wants to get at when he looks at Dave Rubin and he says, you're not a good guy.
Yeah.
What he wants to say is, look, you are responsible. You, not just him, obviously, but any father, any mother, you are responsible for instilling a value of civility in your children. And yet you yourself have to recognize your inherent propensity to be vindictive, to be vengeful, to be unfair.
Yeah.
You have to see that. So if you're going to try to create a society, and even a society as small as a household, if you're going to try to create a just and fair society, you've got to take the plank. Now, this is what Jesus would say and has said. Take the plank out of your own eye before you try to remove the speck from your neighbor's eye or your child's eye. You've got to recognize your own propensity toward what we would say is sin. And so one of the greatest benefits that I've had, Park, in catechizing my kids, and we could probably start talking about that now, is as I'm teaching my kids every morning, I'm teaching myself too. It's like I remind myself of these biblical truths, and dude, it often cuts me a lot deeper than it cuts the kids.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, man, everyone dies because everyone sinned. Yeah, man, I can think of like 15 different ways I've already sinned this morning. I can, I know how much I need a savior, and I don't know the depths of it.
No.
But I know what the Bible tells me about it, which is that it's much deeper than I know.
And that's so amazing too, man. And it can be like a kind of trite thing to talk about having a quiet time, because we don't have a great word for like daily devotions. Maybe that's a good enough word. But it's like, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life reading this one book every single day. It's like, well, don't you ever get sick of it? It's like, well, I need to be reminded of this so often, right? And you see it in the Bible that God says, hey, to the Jews, put this on your door. Nail this on your door. Put it here. Put it on like all over the place.
Put it on your forehead.
Yeah, right. And because you need to be reminded of this all the time. I was actually reading through, the 3 forms of unity. Mm-hmm. You familiar? So I got this little booklet.
But what is that though? What is that?
Yeah, it's the Belgic Confession of Faith, the Heidelberg Catechism, and the Canons of Dort. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, or in the first couple pages of this, it's from the Reformed Church of America, I think, one of them. Well, there's I don't know all the different denominations of Reformed churches. So it's got the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and the Athanasian Creed. Mm-hmm. And just like reading over those, reminding myself, like, that's a really good thing that I need to do all the time. And it's like, it blesses me, dude. I love it.
Yeah. I saw this meme. It said, it was from some Reformed memes for disenchanted teens or one of those
Yeah.
Facebook. It was like this girlfriend calling out her boyfriend and says, "You can remember the entire Apostles' Creed, but you can't remember my birthday." And the guy's going like,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, but we need to remind ourselves of these timeless truths.
Yeah.
Because dude, here's the thing. I know I've got blind spots when I go and you know what's really funny? You know what's funny is I've been catechizing my kids, at least the three olders, for at least 2 years now. I mean, Jacob, we're on his third time through the catechism. He's almost done.
Yeah.
But they are calling me out on my sin. The other day, Elisa and I were arguing, and I was talking to Lucas, and I said, I shouldn't have said that to mommy or whatever. I shouldn't have, raised my voice or whatever. And he goes, "Well, why don't you just go say you're sorry? Like just go apologize." I'm like, yeah.
That's so good.
Absolutely. So I went and reconciled with Elisa because it was like, man, my 5-year-old gets it. When you do something wrong, you repent. Yeah. He said, he said, say you're sorry. We've taught him the value of repenting, of making things right. If someone wrongs you, if you wrong them.
Right.
And
that's
a small example, but
I get it. Yeah. And you've taught that to him, and you've done the hard work in training them in those concepts. They got to be trained. Like if you left your kids alone and you were like, the kids are our future, and I think they can teach us the lessons. They're not coming away with that. Right.
Well, and I tried to connect.
Why don't you go take her truck and throw it at her head? That's what I do.
Because that's what little kids do naturally. Right. Hopefully, Lord willing, prayerfully, what I've done is I've tried to teach these timeless biblical principles to my kids. And however imperfectly I may be doing that, Park.
Yeah.
God's word does not return to him without accomplishing its purpose.
Yeah.
So if I'm giving them scripture, if I'm giving them Bible, that's going to do exponentially more work. And this is where I wish, again, reading this wonderful chapter with so much in here.
Yeah.
I wish Jordan Peterson was a Christian.
Yes.
I wish he could show his readers the value of first of all, grace for when you mess up as a parent. Yeah. These are 12 rules for life. It's law. But we don't need just law. We need grace. And then not only that, but the value of teaching your kids law and grace. And so, for example, when Elisa and I discipline our kids, it's always this long process, and the kids get so impatient with it because they know it's not just going to be the discipline. It's going to be mommy and daddy going over the gospel.
Yeah.
Explaining that that we're both sinners. It's not like only you, child, are a sinner. I'm a sinner too. But Jesus died for sinners. And if we repent of our sins, if we confess our sins to him, he is faithful and righteous and will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Yeah. And then we pray. I pray, or Elisa will pray. And then our kid will pray to God as well and say, God, I'm sorry that I did this or that. And it's like if they try to rush to it, God, I'm sorry, I hit my brother in the face. It's like, no, slow it down. You're talking to God.
Yeah.
This isn't a ritual. You're talking to your Father in heaven.
Yeah. So yeah, man, that's so great. Something I wanted to bring up and ask you, because I don't have kids and you do. So Peterson talks about Sleeping Beauty. Do you remember that part in the book? So he talks about Sleeping Beauty and how he psychoanalyzes it, and it's really good, man. He's pretty convincing sometimes when he talks about these archetypes in different Disney movies, especially. But he talks about Sleeping Beauty and how they didn't invite Maleficent. Is that her name? They didn't invite her, and so she curses the Sleeping Beauty.
Right.
Right. And so she pronounces this curse on her. When she's 16, she'll touch this point of a sewing needle and she'll die. Mm-hmm. And so by protecting against Maleficent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Maleficent, who is malicious and malevolent kind of put together, right? It's got that kind of same root word.
Right.
Because they overprotected, then it came back to bite them, right? And so then through another nice fairy who represents the good nature or something like that.
Yeah.
The curse is just unconsciousness until a prince comes and kisses. So then in response to that, they double down and they get rid of all sewing needles in the whole kingdom. And then it still comes to fruition and you know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
But so he's talking about how Sleeping Beauty, the daughter, was overly protected and wasn't disciplined, wasn't allowed to experience the hardships of life, that the hardships all came on at once.
Yeah.
So, man, what do you think about that as a parent? How do you still protect, but not helicopter parent? How much do you let in? You know what I'm saying? Do you have a good concept of that at all?
You know what? This is something that I have been trying to figure out for at least 8 years. At least 8 years, because my oldest is 8. And so I've been trying to figure out what is the proper level of exposure to give my kids to the world. And it's, because look, it's not like my kids are innocent, but Rousseau is right in one thing. Society is corrupting. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, for sure. Because we have this inherited guilt and we act on it, and you put a bunch of sinners together, you get a simple community.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons I love church. I mean, when you enter into a church, it's like, well, you're still a bunch of sinners. In terms of your action. Yeah. The reason why church is so great is because you're a bunch of sinners who understand grace.
Right.
So you can have conflict with people in your congregation, and you can both start from the platform of we've been forgiven.
Right.
And we can forgive each other. Even if we don't agree. Even if we never agree. Yeah. We can still forgive.
Right.
I had a pastor tell me recently, unity is not always uniformity, or unity is not uniformity.
I love that. Abraham Kuyper did a whole speech on that, because the Dutch are all about unity and diversity and stuff, and he's talking about the difference between unity and uniformity. It's really good. But so anyways, yeah.
Well, so the question is, how much exposure do you want your kids to have? And actually, there's this one movie that came out recently. I won't mention it by name, but I was very against letting my kids watch it because of one particular element that I knew that was sort of popularly going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
It was big news, big headlines that there was going to be, and it was an element that I didn't necessarily want my kids to see.
Yeah.
In an otherwise probably safe kids movie.
Wait, is that because you didn't want that movie to be catechizing them in a way that you didn't want them to, or is it because you didn't want them to see that? What's the reasoning there?
Yeah, good question. And basically, if I were to sort of formulate why that was, I don't want someone else more effectively teaching my kids how to interact with the ideas that are out there than I do.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something. Then I interacted with, or I came across, I think it was a tweet by this Christian thinker who I greatly respect. And what she was saying was, look, this movie is actually very good. There's one line in it. It's a throwaway line, and it's a good opportunity to pause and teach your kids, hey, kids, what do we know about this?
Yeah.
What does the Bible say about this? And it's actually a teachable moment. And what the case she was making is, let your kids see this in a controlled way under your tutelage, under your discipleship, so that they can deal with it now under your guidance, rather than having it come on like Niagara Falls later on, and then they can't deal with it, and then they will be swayed.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. That's what Peterson talks about in this chapter, actually. And he
exactly.
says, if you don't discipline your kids, and you don't teach them in that safe environment where you love them and you are showing them firmness, then they're going to get it out there, and it's going to be way harder. It's going to be way worse, and they might not recover from it.
And the flip side of that too is, So there's evil without and there's evil within. Peterson doesn't say that, but you can sort of see that in his, there's the corrupting influence of society, but then there's the internal corruption that each of us have and each child has.
Yeah.
And how much discomfort do we not only allow from the world or whatever, but how much discomfort do we introduce into our children's lives as a consequence for their manifestation of sin, for their internal corruption? In other words, do you spank your kids?
Yeah, right.
That's sort of a, do you spank your kids? And what Peterson is saying is this: look, while some people say, they answer that question, it's never okay to hit a child. Right. It's like, well, if all you think.
That's a PSA, right? That's like something that our tax dollars go to shaming us. And we see that in commercials.
And what Peterson's saying is two things. One, if the only way that you can understand physical contact is hitting, then you can't distinguish between raindrops and atom bombs. Because there's a wide spectrum there.
Yeah.
And what he says is non-physical discipline can be literally just as psychologically damaging as physical.
He talks about timeouts.
Timeouts actually affect the same part of your brain as a spank.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he talks about the devastation of in jail when you're in the box.
Solitary confinement,
right? Yeah. Yeah, so I love that, man. I love how good he is at that. I love something about him I really, really appreciate is he talks about being firm with kids and how they respond so well to that. And that's something that Jocko Willink talks about. Have you heard Willink talk about that at all, Jocko?
Not that. No.
It's my favorite. This is something I actually do with your kids, so I hope you're okay with it.
I'm not.
But okay. So he says a kid's at a pool party, a bunch of kids around. Kids are at pool party, and I'm talking about Ramadi, and
and the kids are there. They're staying tactical. My kids always stay tactical.
So he says all the kids love him because he's a big burly guy, and they want to climb all over him, and he throws them in the pool and stuff. But so they'll go jump off whatever, they splash, and they come back. How was that? How was that? And he says, instead of going, that was the best. You're the best splasher in the world.
Yes.
It's so good. He goes,
you told me about it, I think.
Yeah, maybe. He goes, hey, that was pretty good. I would say that was a 6.7. I think you can get it up to a 7.8. Let's go see. If you tuck in your leg a little bit, and he's giving ways to succeed. And dude, it's a little kids party, But just that whole way of interacting with kids, of giving them challenges that are, it's not beyond. You're not being a jerk. That was 1.0. You'll never get there. No, dude, that was pretty good. I think you can go even better. I think you can make it better. And then giving them props, and I love doing that, and I do that with your kids all the time, because that's just how I interact with them, and it's actually too exhausting to do it the other way because there's 4 of them running around all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd be like, they tell you a joke, and you're like, dude, that wasn't your best one. And then when Lucas makes me actually laugh, and I'm cracking up, or Jake or Fia, whoever, it's like they know that they earned that. It's not just Uncle Parker laughs at everything.
Right. No, it's really good, and I do the same thing with my kids, and I actually think that you told me about that before, or someone did. And I do think about that, and that has actually impacted me because you don't want to just, there's this sort of like this sort of fake veneer, this phoniness that kids can see through.
Yeah, they see
everything they do.
You're the best.
It's so beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah. It's like it's meaningless. Well, okay, then either they turn into that tyrant where whoever says they don't do anything right are perfectly as bad. Or it's like, I know mom she's not really an objective observer here.
Yeah, right. And when you see the Apostle Paul talking about how, like a father, we admonished you, and there's something there. Now, just speaking to, our listenership is probably primarily men. There's something very manly and very fatherly about exhorting your kids, encouraging them. Great job. You did that was a good effort. I love how you're thinking. I love how you're trying.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, I know you can do a lot better.
Yeah.
I know you can. Get out there and try again. Let me see you do better. And then when they do better, heaping praise on them.
Yeah.
Great job. One of the ways I do that, this is a kind of a silly example, but with beatboxing, my kids, I will beatbox and have fun with that. And my kids love it. And Jacob has taken it on himself to become the best possible beatboxer he can. So he goes, so I think at one point he was beatboxing and I go, Jacob, that's pretty good. You're at like a level 6. And he goes, well, what level are you at? And I'm like, I'm a 10. I'm a 10. And he goes, okay. And then ever since then, dude, he would he will work on his beatboxing. My wife is commenting. She says, Elisa says, Jill, you do a great job with that. Well, thanks, Elisa. Yeah, we're a good team, I think. But he'll come back to me and he'll go, Dad, listen to this, and he'll beatbox, and it's legitimately better than before. He'll go, what level am I at? And here's my problem now. He keeps getting better, and he right now, currently at 8 years old, is legitimately equally good to me, quite possibly better.
Yeah.
And so
now you got to increase the scale.
I know. I told him the scale now goes up to 15.
Nice.
I'm at a 10, but the scale does go up to 15.
Yeah.
I'm not the best in the world, and that kind of shocked him. Like, you're not the best, really? And but he's at a 10 now, and all the other kids too. Like, I think Lucas is at like a 4.5. Jojo's at like a 2. I think Fia's actually at a 4. I think Lucas has gotten a little bit better than Fia right now. But the kids love that. They love being evaluated and rewarded with praise when they do better.
Yeah, totally.
Real quick, Donna commented again. She said, "Really enjoying this discussion." Smiley face. Does Parker have children?
I do not. Not yet. Yeah, we're praying through that. And we'll see if the Lord blesses that soon.
Parker's kids are going to be awesome. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to say Parker's kids, Parker and Julie are going to raise some incredible kids. They're going to be sensible, but Julie being just both of you being who you are, these kids are going to come out doing like backflips and like I don't know what
all of my hopes and dreams, I'm going to live vicariously through them. That's what we're here for, right?
Right, and getting really stressed when they don't live up to your standards.
Yeah, that's good. Really just taking it out on them.
Yeah. That's a joke.
But I really, really appreciate this chapter because there's so much meat to eat here. Mm-hmm. There's not a ton to spit out. He's not a Christian, so he's not talking about like teaching your children the gospel,
right?
But he's talking about being firm with them in a way that is gentle still, and I love that. He's talking about helping kids eat, something as simple as that, where it's like little Billy or whoever is super fussy and he doesn't eat, and that's okay. And Peterson's like, that's actually not okay that your kid's not eating all day,
right? Because
you haven't put in the work to figure out how to help them eat.
Then they don't sleep well if they don't eat well. And then they stay up, and then that messes with you and your wife when you're trying to spend time together.
Right.
We're on the exact same page, and literally, I'm on page 127, which talks about that. I want to read this because I thought this is the best 2 paragraphs I've read in this entire book.
Do it.
After a few days of this degeneration, this is his son is not eating, okay, and he's not sleeping because he's not eating. After a few days of this degeneration, I decided to take the spoon back. In other words, I'm not going to let my kid feed himself anymore. I prepared for war. I set aside sufficient time. A patient adult can defeat a 2-year-old, hard as that is to believe. As the saying goes, old age and treachery can always overcome youth and skill. This is partly because time lasts forever when you're 2. Half an hour for me was a week for my son. I assured myself of victory. He was stubborn and horrible, but I could be worse. We sat down, face to face, bowl in front of him. It was high noon, capital H, capital N. He knew it, and I knew it. He picked up the spoon. I took it from him and spooned up a delicious mouthful of mush. I moved it deliberately toward his mouth. He eyed me in precisely the same manner as the playground foot monster. He curled his lips downward into a tight frown, rejecting all entry. I chased his mouth around with the spoon as he twisted his head around in tight circles. But I had more tricks up my sleeve. I poked him in the chest with my free hand in a manner calculated to annoy. He didn't budge. I did it again and again and again. Not hard, but not in a manner to be ignored either. 10 or so pokes later, he opened his mouth, planning to emit a sound of outrage. Ha! His mistake.
Ha!
Ha! Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Ha! His mistake. I deftly inserted the spoon. He tried gamely to force out the offending food with his tongue, but I know how to deal with that too. I just placed my forefinger horizontally across his lips. Some came out, but some was swallowed too. Score one for Dad. I gave him a pat on the head and told him he was a good boy. And I meant it. When someone does something you are trying to get them to do, reward them. No grudge after victory. An hour later, it was all over. There was outrage. There was some wailing. My wife had to leave the room. The stress was too much. But food was eaten by child. My son collapsed exhausted on my chest. We had a nap together, and he liked me a lot better when he woke up than he had before he was disciplined.
Mm.
I wrote solid gold under this passage. And let me tell you, every parent of any child under the age of 3 can 100% relate to that passage.
Isn't it? I think it's just so amazing that, you kind of absorb ideas about kids through culture. It seeps in, and there's the Rousseauian beautiful little kid. But if you experience time with a kid, they are rebellious, and they don't know in the sense that but it is high noon, right? And they look at you, and you like. I remember Jake when he was super young. You go, he's throwing wood chips everywhere, and you're like, "Hey, buddy, don't do that." And he does it again, and you're like, "Buddy, seriously, don't do that again." And he picks up 2 handfuls, and he looks at you right in the eyes and goes. And then you had to spank him, and it was like, I asked you, I'm like, dude, why did he do that, man? Like, I don't get it. And you're like, well, sinful, rebellious little child, man. He's got to be, and it was just like, yeah, that's true. He knew what he was doing. He knew he was being rebellious, even though he didn't maybe have all the concepts and everything. He looked at you right in the eyes and was like, I'm disobeying Daddy. Let's see what happens. Yeah. It was amazing. But yeah, dude, they're little humans. They're just small little humans. You're on mute, by the way.
Thanks. They're sinful children. Guess what? Just like you and me.
Right.
Just like Julie, just like Elisa.
Yeah.
And here's the scary thing, Park. Here's the scary thing. As men, we don't have mom and dad over us. In that, now, I call Dad for advice all the time. Probably on average, maybe once, at least a couple times a month, maybe probably more. Okay. I'm always calling Dad for advice. But in terms of discipline, when I need to be disciplined, it's God the Father.
Right.
It's like hopefully mom and dad instilled enough self-discipline in me that I don't need to constantly be disciplined by God. Now, I'm grateful when God does it, but it's a scary thing to know that above me is God.
Yeah.
And
he's watching the way you discipline or don't discipline your kids.
That's right.
And you're responsible for representing God the Father to your children.
To my kids.
Which is amazing.
That being said, it is Jesus who perfectly illustrates God the Father, who perfectly represents God the Father. Scripture is so clear about that. My job is to lead my kids, yes, to act like a godly father, but also to point them toward Jesus.
For sure.
Because it's Jesus who not only is our perfect representative of what it means to be human, but it's also Jesus who dies for all of our failures at being human. And it's Jesus who is our quote unquote everlasting Father, meaning he's actually our representative. He's our federal head before God. And I want to just read Hebrews 12:11 because it says, and one verse from Proverbs, Hebrews 12:11 says, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. Think about Jordan Peterson poking his kid.
Right.
But later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Mm. And Proverbs 13:24 says, whoever spares the rod hates his son. However, if you interpret rod to be non-physical, that's fine, but it's discipline. I think it's both. I think it's physical and metaphorical there.
Right.
But he who loves him is diligent to discipline him.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're doing it lovingly, you understand your child will be better off, because if you spare the rod now, the world is going to bring a sword later.
Yeah.
Do you want the loving rod, or do you want the unloving sword?
Yeah. And giving them the ability to be disciplined gives them freedom to do all sorts of other stuff. Right. And it's like, if you want a lack of freedom, be super undisciplined. Wake up late and have less time, and it's amazing. Yeah, that's another thing that Jocko talks about a lot, and Tim Keller talks about. Right, like this is a whole thing. Like being disciplined actually frees you up, gives you freedom. Yeah, man. So this was a really good chapter. I loved it. I thought it was really great. I'm gonna probably review it again, especially when we start having kids, and praying through, how I can appropriate these lessons for myself and my family.
Yeah, that's good. I think 2 quick recommendations on iTunes U. I believe it's on iTunes U. You can get the audio lectures of Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp. Ted Tripp is Paul Tripp's brother. Paul Tripp has also written some excellent books on parenting and things like that. Ted Tripp is his brother. And Shepherding a Child's Heart is a fantastic resource on parenting, on disciplining, on discipling your children. You're not going to force your kids to believe in Jesus, okay? But you can disciple them in a Christ-like way.
Yeah.
And that's a great resource to help you with that.
And you're responsible too, right? Like you've been entrusted with these kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Another great resource, if you go to Family Life, let's see, Family Life is a Cru ministry. If you go to Family Life, I want to say .org, it might be .com, but if you go to Family Life,
I bet it's .org.
You know what? I don't. Well, it says they're doing some work on the site. So, okay, no, it's familylife.com. If you go to familylife.com, they've got some fantastic parenting resources on there as well. It's a great. One of my favorite articles on there is "You Don't Work for Your Kids." It's really, really good. Basically, it's about, your kid's not the boss, you are. And that's not wrong or cruel to believe that. It's actually kinder to your children not to put them in charge. And then, of course, I want to just give a quick plug for my own resource, Catechids, the New Covenant Catechism for Little Ones. I'm pretty proud of this, man. I'm not proud of myself. I'm proud of a couple of folks who have reached out, one of them being Antonio Salgado.
Yeah. He put it in Spanish for you, is that right?
He translated it into Spanish. And then another organization called Magna Gratia translated it into Romanian. So
That's
you can
awesome.
now get catechids in 3 different languages. If you want to know more about that, somebody can shoot me an email at thethink.institute@gmail.com, and I will hook you up with a free digital copy of that resource in any of those 3 languages. And you know what? If there's somebody out there who wants to translate it into another language, I would love that. I want to get this resource into as many people's hands as possible, as many different languages, ethnicities, family groups, whatever we can do. I want to get this out there because I think God's using it to bless people purely by His grace. So all glory to Christ on that. But I've been happy to see how that's grown.
Yeah.
Anything
Well, sweet,
else?
man. No, hope that it. I don't know. Hope that it.
Hope that it
What do you
stepped
got?
on your fingers as you were
Hope
going.
it made. Hope it. Hope it makes you stop your kid from doing stuff that you hate.
Yeah. Hope it forcefully spoon-fed your toddler.
Yeah, that's good. All right, man.
All right. Real quick, connect with Parker Set a Case by going to parkersetacase.com. Connect with the Think Institute simply by going to thethink.institute/podcast for all the podcast episodes, including all Sons of Thunder episodes. Connect with us on pretty much all the social media, including now Parler, Parler. And There's lots of great resources out there. And if you know of some, please let us know, because we want to be better and do better and all the things as well. So thank you for listening. This is Not Goodbye, little pit stop along the way of your spiritual journey. And until next time, all the stuff we just said, cut and paste that, put that at the end.
Yeah.
And we hope it does all those things for you. God bless. And there we go. Goodbye.
Awesome.